So I need to put a handle on this piece. I only need one handle, but I'm gonna pull kind of a longer piece to show how I make shorter blanks to put on, multiple coffee cups or shapes like that. Then I'll do one longer one and show you how I attach it to this piece. So I start with a blob of clay, much more than I think that I will actually need, so that I can form the top half of it into kind of a knob to hold on to, like so. And then the rest of it, just sort of shape it kind of roughly into kind of a starting point. Just kind of like so. And that's kind of what we will begin with pulling. And then you want to use lots of water. Keep the piece wet, keep your hand very wet. And basically you just start pulling. And what I'm doing here is pulling through this portion of my hand, just these two fingers, and you're sort of trying to form more or less the shape of a handle with your hand that the clay will pass through. And you want to pull with even pressure from the top all the way right off the end, and rotate the direction so that you're creating a shape that's consistent on both sides. So I'll do a few pulls this way, a few pulls this way, continue that all the way until you have the length that you want, like so. First sign of any resistance, more water. Pull like so. Consistent pressure. And even coming right off the end, you start to get kind of a heavier ball in the end. I just break it off because it will really mess you up. At least it meshes me up anyway. So break that off. And depending on what you're pulling for, if it's 4 coffee mugs or something like that, that's probably about where I would go, about this size, to make kind of smaller blanks, which I would then just lay out on a board and break them off. Just roughly the same length. So depending how many you need, however many cups you have. And then one of those will essentially become a small version of this. This, I would then, after it's set on this board for, I don't know, half an hour maybe, firmed up a little, I would cut off the end, and that would become a blank for a handle for a coffee cup. I'll pull this larger one and I'll lay it out, let it firm up a bit, and then I'll show you the next step that I do for attaching it. That's probably going to be good for this piece. Okay. So now I'll pick where I want the top to attach. So probably somewhere right in here. Just score it like you would attaching any other handle. And then this is still pretty soft. I may normally let it sit up a little more than this, but this is okay. And then I hold it between my fingers, and then I kind of just tap it to kind of flare out that top attachment point, kind of give a wider attachment. Then give that a little bit of a score. Probably not really necessary to put the slip on with the clay being this soft, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And I put the slip or the water on the handle itself, because you sort of know you know, on here it's kind of a guessing game how much of an area to cover, but I just like to put it right on the handle. Then just support the piece inside, kind of agitate it back and forth a little bit, get it really nicely stuck on there. Make sure that it's kind of lined up. And then, given the fact that this is still pretty soft, I would then just set it up here. And if I had multiple handles to do, I would probably do all of them and line them up on the shelf like that, let them firm up a bit more, and then next step we'll finish attaching the top, clean it up a bit, and attach the bottom. Okay, this has probably been sitting here for maybe 10 minutes or so. Still quite soft, but probably good enough to work with. At this point, I would just blend this in with my finger, this top attachment. And you can kind of refine it a little, take away, once you've blended it in, you can take away a little of the clay if you don't want too broad of an attachment point, but I've found that the glaze will hide a lot of the crimes and kind of make it not quite as pronounced. At least the dipping glazes I'm using, they will tend to coat it quite nicely. Then just smooth it out a little bit, wet your finger and smooth it out. And now we've got a nice sturdy attachment point at the top, which you can see like so. And now this blank I've pulled already quite long, but I think I'm going to actually attach the bottom of it down here near the bottom. So I think it may need to be just a slightly bit longer, but not much. So I would do the same thing that I did with the blank of clay. Wet the piece, wet your hand nicely. And then start right at the top. I put my hand right against the mug itself, or the piece, to start. And same, even pressure, rotate. And what I've discovered here is, at least for me, the biggest problem I have with this step, and I'm still learning to do this, is that I tend to get it too thin right about in this area. Many times I've had to break it off and start over because it gets too thin right in that area. So if you see that start happening, I've learned that I can kind of pull some down with my thumb. If you use your finger to support it at the back and pull the clay down a little with your thumb, it will help that. But this probably is just about long enough. Let me get it a little bit thinner. And then the last few passes, I mean, it's basically finished now, but I like to go down each side with my thumb and through the middle, just like that. Kind of gives it a little more personality. Instead of just it being a blob, kind of a blank shape, it kind of gives it a little bit more definition. Then support it, hold it, eyeball everything, roll it down basically into the position that you think that you want it. I'm going to give this one a nice sweep. And then at the bottom, the clay's so wet, I don't normally even score it or put slip or anything on it. I just press it in. That's looking pretty good to me. And I've found also that the clay seems to, I've attached many handles where when they dry and they're fired, I attach them straight when they are fired, they seem to be crooked. They kind of go off a little, and I think it's the clay that gets kind of wound up when you throw it on the wheel, and as it dries and it's fired, it kind of relaxes back to the position that it wants to be in, so that it will twist slightly and make your handles look a bit off. So I just basically put them on slightly off, just off to the left slightly, and it's kind of 50-50. Sometimes the clay doesn't move much, sometimes it does move, but if it does, it will twist it right back into alignment. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. I'm putting it just a little bit off. And then I'll just dry my hand and I just push it in at the bottom, just like so. And I don't really worry too much about the shape of the handle right now. Once it's been on here for an hour or so, then you can manipulate it and give it the final shape that you want. But I just push it in like that, and then I just pull half of it off to one side, pull the other half off to the other side, just kind of in a sweeping motion. I kind of like the detail that this creates. And then the piece that's left at the bottom, just clean it off with your thumb, and it kind of leaves you with a nice kind of something along those lines. Refine it a little, keep that split in the middle, and then clean up the sides slightly. That's more or less how I attach the bottom. Can you see? Is that just something like that? And it adds a little area there that kind of is good for the glaze to catch in and create some nice effects. And then I'll push this handle up a little. When it's firmed up a little, it's sagging slightly, but I'll sit it on its top to firm up for a while. Then after about an hour, you can push it into position, and that's basically it. So it's firmed up slightly now. It's resting on its top. It's kind of settled into pretty close to the shape I'm looking for here. Maybe just something like that. Kind of gives it a nice greeting, you know, for the hand on this top kind of portion. But that's pretty much it. So I'm still learning to do this. So any tips or tricks out there that you can give me, I'm all ears. So there you go. Nice big handle on a smaller size piece. And thanks for watching. See you next time. And the key is here is lots of water to keep everything very wet. The first sign of any resistance, more water. Otherwise, there's a risk of just snapping it in half.